Continuing in our daily Rambam study, the Chabad study program of daily Rambam is in the one chapter a day. We're starting the negative commandments, part 1. Number 1, the first mitzvah of the negative commandments is not to consider the thought that there is another divinity aside from God. As Exodus 20:13 states, "You shall have no other gods before me." So is to not think, you must not think that there is another divinity aside from God. It says in Exodus 20:13, "You shall have no other gods before me." Okay? 2, not to make an idol, not to fashion, to physically make an idol, not to make oneself or have one made for oneself by others, as Exodus 20 verse 4 states, "Do not make an idol for yourselves." 3, not to make false gods, even for others, as Leviticus 19:4 states, "Do not make molten gods for yourselves." Not to make images for decoration, even when one does not worship them. As Exodus 20:20 states, "Do not make a representation of anything that is with me." 5, not to bow down to any false gods, even though they are not generally worshipped by bowing down before them, as Exodus 20:13 states, "Do not bow down to them." 6, not to worship false gods with the types of service with which it is customary to worship them, as Exodus 20 verse 3 says, do not serve them. Not to offer one's son to Moloch, as Leviticus 18:21 states, "Do not give any of your children to offer to Moloch." 8, not to perform the deeds associated with an ov, as Leviticus 19:31 states, "Do not turn to the ovot." I think that's necromancy. It's either necromancy or it's making a bone talk or something like that. Certain type of black magic. So Ov and Yidoni, that might be Yidoni, because he doesn't translate here. He just says, okay, number 9 is not to perform the deeds associated with Yidoni, as Leviticus 19:31 states, "Do not turn to the Yidonim." So one is necromancy and one is making bones talk through black magic. Okay. 10, not to take interest in the worship of false gods, as Leviticus 19:4 states, "Do not turn to false gods." Okay. 11, not to erect a pillar for purposes of worship, as Deuteronomy 16:22 states, "Do not erect a pillar for yourselves." 12, not to make hewn stones upon which to prostrate oneself, as Leviticus 26:1 states, "You shall not place hewn stones." 13, not to plant a tree on the temple premises, as Deuteronomy 16:21 states, "Do not plant it in a Asherah or any other tree." 14 is not to take an oath on a false god as requested by one of its worshippers, nor to have one of them take an oath on their false god, as Exodus 23:13 states, "And the name of other gods you shall not mention, nor should it be heard from your mouth." V'shem Elohim acharim lo tazkiru. Okay. 15, not to act as a missionary mediach, meaning it's like a seducer, someone to persuade Jews to worship false gods. Shelo lehadiach b'nei Yisrael achar avodah zoeh shenemar v'lo yishmar picha zo'ara lemadiach. Okay, so you're not allowed to be a missionary, some kind of like to persuade Jews to worship false gods, as Exodus 23:13 states, "And the name of other gods shall not be heard from your mouth." Our sages taught that this is a prohibition against acting as a missionary for the worship of false gods. Okay. 16, not to act as a missionary Mesit. It's called a Mesit. Mesit Mediach. Persuade an individual, Jew, to worship false gods. As Deuteronomy 13:12 states, with regard to such missionaries, and they shall not continue to do so. 17, not to show affection to a Mesit. As Deuteronomy 13:9 states, do not show affection to him. Okay, that's 17. 18, not to reduce one's hatred for a Mesit. You have to continue hating a Mesit. Okay. As Deuteronomy 13:9 says, do not listen to him. Okay, 19, not to try to save a Mesit, but rather to see to it that he is executed. As Deuteronomy 13:9 says, do not have mercy upon him. 20, for the person whom a Mesit tried to convince not to advance any arguments on behalf of the Mesit, as Deuteronomy 13:9 states, do not have pity upon him. Okay. 21, for the person whom a Mesit tried to convince not to withhold any evidence he is aware of that would incriminate the Mesit, as Deuteronomy 13:9 says, and do not try to cover up for him. 22, not to benefit from ornaments that have adorned false gods, as Deuteronomy 7:25 states, do not covet the gold or silver which is upon them. Take a brief break and be back momentarily. Okay, up to 23. Not to rebuild an apostate city to its former stature, as Deuteronomy 13:17 states, it shall never be rebuilt. 24. Not to benefit from the property of an apostate city, as Deuteronomy 13:18 states, let nothing that has been condemned cling to your hand. Okay, 25. Not to benefit from false gods, from any of their accessories, anything offered to them, or any wine brought as a libation for them, as Deuteronomy 7:26 states, do not bring an abomination into your house. 26. Not to prophesy in the name of false gods, as Deuteronomy 18:20 states, the prophet who speaks in the name of other gods shall die. 27. Not to relate false prophecies. As Deuteronomy 18:20 states, when a prophet presumptuously makes a declaration in my name, which I have not commanded him. Okay, 28. Not to listen to someone who prophesies in the name of false gods. As Deuteronomy 13:4 states, do not listen to the words of that prophet. 29. Not to refrain from executing a false prophet, nor to fear him, as Deuteronomy 18:22 states, do not fear him. Next, 30. Not to follow the laws or customs of the worshippers of false gods, as Leviticus 20:23 states, do not follow the practices of the nation that I'm driving out before you. 31. Not to practice black magic, as Deuteronomy 18:10 states, there shall not be found among you a magician. 32. Not to practice divination, as Leviticus 19:26 states, do not practice divination. This is kind of a loaded thing, because what do you consider divination? Some people might say, how do you differentiate between divination and casting lots? Some people might say casting lots is divination. Right? Hard to know. Let your conscience be your guide, I guess. Not to act as a soothsayer, as Leviticus openly states, do not act as a soothsayer. Not to practice sorcery, as Deuteronomy 18:10 states, there shall be not found among you a sorcerer. Not to cast spells, as Deuteronomy 18:11 states, there shall not be found among you one who casts spells. Not to consult an oath. Deuteronomy states, there shall not be found among you one who consults with an oath. Not to consult the Adoni, as Deuteronomy openly states, there shall not be found among you one who consults an oath or Adoni. Not to seek information from the dead in dreams, as Deuteronomy openly states, there shall not be found among you one who attempts to communicate with the dead. 39. For a woman not to wear articles appropriate for men, as Deuteronomy 22:5 states, a woman should not wear a man's clothing. 40. For a man not to wear articles appropriate for women, as Deuteronomy 22:5 states, a man should not wear a woman's clothing. This prohibition was instituted because this is an idolatrous custom. Explicit statements to this effect are found in the text describing their worship. 41. Not to tattoo our bodies like the worshippers of false gods. As Leviticus 19:28 states, do not tattoo your flesh. 42. Not to wear shatnez, as do the priests of false gods. As Deuteronomy 22:11 states, do not wear shatnez. Not to shave the temples of our heads, as do the worshippers of false gods, as Leviticus 19:27 states. Do not shave your temples. 44. Not to shave off our beards entirely, as do the priests of false gods. As Leviticus 19:27 states, do not shave the corners of your beard. Not to make cuts in our flesh, as the worshippers of false gods do, as Deuteronomy 14:1 states, do not cut yourselves. Gedila is another term for cutting. Gedida and Srita. Okay, 46. Never to dwell in the land of Egypt, as Deuteronomy 17:16 states, do not ever return on this path again. 47. Not to stray after the thoughts of one's heart or the sights one's eyes behold, as Numbers 15:39 says, do not stray after your heart and your eyes. 48. Not to establish a covenant with the 7 Canaanite nations, as Deuteronomy 7:2 states, do not establish a covenant with them. Not to allow a single member of the 7 Canaanite nations to live. This was only for them, not for now, though. Not to allow a single member of the 7 Canaanite nations to live. As Deuteronomy 20:16 states, do not allow a soul to live. 50. Not to show favor to the worshippers of false gods. As Deuteronomy 7:2 states, do not show them favor. 51. Not to allow the worshippers of false gods to settle in our land. As Exodus 23:33 states, they shall not settle in your land. Not to marry Gentiles. As Deuteronomy 7:3 states, do not marry among them. 53. For a Jewish woman never to marry an Ammonite or Moabite, even after conversion, as Deuteronomy 23:4 states, an Ammonite or a Moabite shall never enter the congregation of God. 54. Not to prevent the third generation of converts from the descendants of Esau from marrying among Jewish people. As Deuteronomy 23:8 states, do not utterly despise the Edomite. Okay, 55. Not to prevent the third generation of Egyptian converts from marrying among not to prevent the third generation of Egyptian converts from marrying among the Jewish people, as Deuteronomy 23 verse 8 states, do not utterly despise the Egyptian. 56, not to make an offer of peace to Ammon and Moab at the outbreak of war, as is done for other nations, as Deuteronomy 23:7 states, do not seek their peace and welfare. 57, not to destroy fruit trees, nor to destroy anything else of value, as Deuteronomy 20:19 states, do not destroy its trees. 58, for soldiers not to fear or to become frightened of the enemy during war, as Deuteronomy 7:21 states, do not panic before them, and Deuteronomy 3:22 states, do not fear them. 59, not to forget the wicked deeds which Amalek perpetrated against us, as Deuteronomy 25:19 states, do not forget. 60, the prohibition against blessing, it's a euphemism for the opposite of God, as Exodus 22:27 states, do not curse God. Leviticus 27:16 mentions the punishment. One who curses the name of God shall surely die. This is a general principle. A negative commandment is involved. Whenever the Torah mentions the punishments of karet or execution, with the exception of circumcision and the paschal sacrifice, which are positive commandments, punishable by karet. Okay, stop here for now and continue with the rest. Continuing on with the Rambam. Okay, we're not 61. Not to violate an oath, as Leviticus 19:12 says, do not swear falsely in my name. 62. Not to take an oath in vain, as Exodus 20 verse 7 states, do not take the name of God your Lord in vain. 63. Not to profane the name of the Holy One, blessed be He, as Leviticus 22:32 states, not to profane my holy name. 64. Not to test the promises of God, as Deuteronomy 6:15 states, do not test God your Lord. 65. Not to destroy the temple, synagogues, or houses of study, and similarly not to erase any of God's sacred names, nor to destroy any sacred texts, as Deuteronomy 12:3-4 states, you shall surely destroy them. Do not do this to God your Lord. 66. Not to leave a corpse that was hung on the gallows, as Deuteronomy 21:23 states, do not leave his body on the gallows. 67. Not to interrupt the watch held around the temple, as Leviticus 18:30 states, you shall keep my watch. 68. For a priest not to enter the temple building at all times, as Leviticus 16:2 states, and he shall not enter the sanctuary at all times. 69. For a priest with a disqualifying physical deformity not to proceed beyond the beginning of the altar, as Leviticus 21:23 states, however, to the parochet he shall not approach. 70. For a priest with a disqualifying physical deformity not to serve in the temple, as Leviticus 21:17 states, anyone who has a blemish may not approach to present. 71. For a priest with a disqualifying physical deformity of a temporary nature not to serve in the temple, as Leviticus 21:18 states, anyone who has a blemish may not approach to offer a sacrifice. 72. For the Levites not to perform the services of the priests, and for the priests not to perform the services of the Levites, as Numbers 18:3 states, with regard to the Levites, neither to the sacred vessels nor to the altar shall they approach, so that they do not die, neither they nor you. 73. For a person who is intoxicated not to enter the temple, nor to render a lawful decision, as Leviticus 10:9 states, do not drink wine or strong drink when you enter the tent of the testimony. And it also 10:11 states, or when you render a decision for the children of Israel. Okay, 74. For a non-priest not to serve in the temple, as Numbers 18:4 states, an unauthorized person shall not approach them. 75. For a priest who is ritually impure not to serve in the temple, as Leviticus 22 verse 2 states, and they shall not and they shall separate themselves from the sacred offerings of the children of Israel. 76. For a priest who has immersed himself in order to purify himself from ritual impurity, not to serve in the temple until the conclusion of that day. As Leviticus 21:6 states, and they shall not profane. 77. For a priest who is ritually impure, not to enter the temple courtyard, as Numbers 5:3 states, and they shall not make your camp impure. This refers to the camp of the divine presence. 78. For a person who is impure, not to enter the camp of the Levites, for the parallel for all time being the Temple Mount, as Deuteronomy 23:11 states, do not enter the camp. This refers to the camp of the Levites. 79. Not to build the altar with hewn stones, as Exodus 20 verse 25 states, do not make them hewn. Lo tivne eten gazit. 80. Not to ascend the altar using steps, as Exodus 20:23 states, do not ascend my altar with steps. 81. Not to offer any undesired incense, offering, or any sacrifices on the golden altar, as Exodus 30 verse 9 states, do not offer any unauthorized incense upon it. 82. Not to extinguish the fire of the altar, as Leviticus 6 verse 6 states, burn a continuous fire on the altar, do not extinguish it. 83. Do not duplicate the composition of the anointing oil, as Exodus 30:32 states, and do not duplicate its formula. Uvemat kunto lo ta'asu lachem. Not to anoint an unauthorized person with the anointing oil, as Exodus 30:32 states, do not anoint the flesh of a person with it. 85. Not to duplicate the composition of the incense offering, as Exodus 30:37 states, do not duplicate its formula. 86. Not to remove the staves of the ark, as Exodus 25:16 states, they shall not be removed from it. 87. For the high priest's breastplate not to come loose from the ephod, as Exodus 20:28 states, the breastplate shall not come loose from the ephod. 88. For the high priest's cloak not to tear, as Exodus 28:32 states, it shall have a woven border around it, it shall not tear. 89. Not to offer sacred offerings outside the temple, as Deuteronomy 12:13 states, be careful lest you offer your burnt offerings. 90. Not to slaughter sacred offerings outside the temple, as Leviticus 17:3-4 states, a person who slaughters an ox or sheep without bringing it to the tent of testimony, he shall be punished by karet. 91. Not to consecrate animals with disqualifying physical blemishes and sacrifices to be offered on the altar, as Leviticus 22 verse 20 states, any animal which has a blemish shall not be sacrificed. This prohibition involves the animal's consecration. 92. Not to slaughter animals with disqualifying physical blemishes and sacrifices, as Leviticus 22:22 states, do not sacrifice these to God. 93. Not to sprinkle the blood of animals with disqualifying physical blemishes on the altar, as Leviticus 22:24 states, do not sacrifice to God. This provision involves sprinkling the animal's blood. 94. Not to burn the sacrificial portions of animals with disqualifying physical blemishes and sacrifices on the altar, as Leviticus 22:22 states, do not make a fire offering them. 95. Not to offer animals with disqualifying physical blemishes as a temporary nature as sacrifice. Blemishes of a temporary nature as sacrifices, as Deuteronomy 71 states, do not sacrifice to God your Lord an ox or a sheep that has a blemish. This refers to a blemish of a temporary nature. 96. Not to offer an animal with a disqualifying physical blemish as a sacrifice when it is brought before the Gentiles, as Leviticus 22:25 states, do not offer sacrifices from these animals when they are given by Gentiles. 97. Not to inflict a disqualifying physical blemish upon a consecrated animal, as Leviticus 22:21 states, it shall not have a blemish. This can be interpreted to mean do not inflict a blemish upon it. 98. Not to burn as an offering anything which is sweetened or leavened, as Leviticus 2:11 states, you may not burn anything leavened or sweet as a fire offering. 99, not to offer sacrifice which is unsalted, as Leviticus 22:13 states, do not omit the salt of God's covenant. 100, not to offer as a sacrifice an animal received by a prostitute as her fee, or an animal received in exchange for a dog, as Deuteronomy 23:19 states, do not bring a prostitute's fee or the price of a dog. Okay, up to 101, take a brief break, and with that, we will finish it up. Weiter 101, not to slaughter an animal and its offspring on the same day, as Leviticus 22 verse 25 states, do not slaughter it and its offspring on the same day. 102, not to place an olive oil on the meal offering brought by a sinner, as Leviticus 5:11 states, do not place oil upon it. 103, not to place frankincense on such a sacrifice, as Leviticus continues, and do not place frankincense upon it. 104, not to place oil on the meal offering brought by a sotah, as Numbers 5:15 states, do not pour oil upon it. 105, not to place frankincense on such a sacrifice, as Numbers continues, and do not place frankincense upon it. 106, not to substitute another animal for one selected as a sacred offering, as Leviticus 27:10 states, do not exchange it or substitute another for it. 107, not to change the designation of a consecrated animal from one sacrifice to another, as Leviticus 27:26 states regarding a firstling animal, a person should not consecrate it, meaning he should not consecrate it as another sacrifice. 108, not to redeem a firstling kosher animal, as Numbers 18:17 states, nevertheless, a firstling ox do not redeem. 109, not to sell the tithe of cattle, as Leviticus 27:33 states, it shall not be redeemed. 110, not to sell a field that has been dedicated, as Leviticus 27:28 states, it shall not be sold. 111, not to redeem a field that has been dedicated, as Leviticus states, it shall not be redeemed. 112, not to sever the head of a bird brought as a sin offering, as Leviticus 5:8 states, he shall pinch off its head, umalak et rosho, without separating it. Mimul orpo v'lo yavdil. 113, not to work with consecrated animals, as Deuteronomy 15:19 states, do not work with your firstling ox. 114, not to share consecrated animals, as Deuteronomy 15:19 states, do not share your firstling sheep. 115, not to slaughter the paschal sacrifice while one possesses chametz, as Exodus 23:18 states, do not sacrifice the blood of my offering in the presence of chametz. 116, not to allow the sacrificial portions of the paschal sacrifice to become disqualified by remaining overnight, as Exodus 23:18 states, do not allow the fat of my festive offering to remain until morning. 117, not to allow the meat of the paschal sacrifice to remain overnight, as Exodus 12:10 states, do not leave over any of it until the morning. 118, not to allow the meat of the chagiga sacrifice to remain until the third day, as Deuteronomy 16:14 states, do not leave over any of the meat according to the oral tradition we have learned. That the verse refers to the chagiga sacrifice offered on the 14th of Nisan. The phrase until the morning in that verse refers to the morning of the second day of Pesach, the third day after the sacrifice was offered. 119, not to allow the meat of the second paschal sacrifice to remain until the morning, as Numbers 19:12 states. Do not leave over any of it until the morning. 1:20, not to allow the meat of the Thanksgiving offering to remain until the morning, as Leviticus 22:30 states. Do not leave over any of it until the morning. The same law applies to all other sacrifices. They should not be left over beyond the time allotted for their consumption. 1:21, not to break any of the bones of the paschal sacrifice, as Exodus 12:46 states, neither shall you break a bone of it. 1:22, not to break any of the bones of the second paschal sacrifice, as Numbers 19:12 states, neither shall you break a bone of it. That's it. That's all, folks, for today. That's part 1 of the Negative Commandments, Rambam Sefer Mitzvot.